The tarmac glimmered under the early morning sun, wet from a drizzle that had started hours ago. JFK International hummed with its usual chaos, luggage carts rattling, fuel trucks inching across painted lanes, and passengers hustling toward terminals, some with the sleepy resignation of early flights, others buzzing with a sense of adventure. Amid the background noise, Amelia Vaughn walked briskly, her leather flight jacket snug around her shoulders, her hair tied in a practical braid that swung behind her as she moved. At 24, she was the youngest female co-pilot in Skylink Airlines history, a fact that weighed on her like an invisible badge she had not asked for but could never ignore. Amelia paused at the edge of the jet bridge, her eyes scanning the plane she would soon command alongside Captain Marcus Hale, a veteran pilot with over 30 years of flying experience. The Boeing 737 gleamed under the weak sunlight, engines humming with a mechanical heartbeat. Amelia's palms tingled as she reached for the railing. Today was supposed to be just another routine flight to Charlotte, nothing more than the usual climb, cruise, and descent. But there was a quiet tension in the air she couldn't shake, something that felt like the storm before a thunderclap. Inside the cockpit, Marcus Hale was already running through pre-flight checks, his calm, measured voice a sharp contrast to the bustling activity outside. Amelia climbed in beside him, the familiar scent of leather and metal greeting her like an old friend. She ran her hands over the polished controls, feeling the chill of the aluminum beneath her fingertips. Every button, every switch had a story, a purpose, and today, she was acutely aware that every single one of them could mean the difference between routine and disaster. "Morning, Ghost Rider," Marcus said without looking up. His nickname for her had started months ago, a playful jab at her daring maneuvers in flight school. Amelia forced a small smile, though her stomach twisted. The nickname had always been lighthearted, but this morning it felt different, weighted. "Morning, Captain," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Her training told her to remain calm, but instinct whispered that something wasn't right. The passengers began to board. Amelia stole glances through the cockpit window, noticing a diverse crowd. A young mother soothed a crying infant, her eyes strained and weary. A businessman in a sharp navy suit tapped nervously at his phone, sweat beading along his temple. An elderly couple clasped hands, whispering to each other, oblivious to the tension brewing hundreds of feet above the ground. Amelia felt a pang of responsibility. All these lives were about to be placed under her watch. Marcus glanced at her over the instruments. "Check your 6, Ghost Rider," he said softly, almost under his breath. Amelia froze, he rarely whispered. The tone carried an urgency she couldn't place. "Check my 6, she thought, scanning the horizon through the cockpit window. Everything seemed normal, too normal. Her fingers tightened around the control yoke. The cabin crew called out, announcing boarding completion. Amelia ran through her mental checklist. Cabin secure, doors locked, safety briefings complete. Outside, the engines roared to life, a deep, vibrating hum that reverberated through the plane. Amelia took her seat, adjusting the headset over her ears, the world narrowing to the tiny instruments, the gentle vibration beneath her, and the steady voice of Marcus Hale guiding her. The plane began taxiing toward the runway. Amelia felt a thrill she hadn't anticipated. Flying had always been about freedom, the exhilarating escape from gravity's relentless pull. Yet today, the familiar thrill came laced with something she couldn't name. Shadows seemed to hang just beyond the tarmac lights, shapes in the clouds that didn't belong, a flicker of movement at the edge of her vision. The runway stretched ahead, a ribbon of concrete framed by blinking lights. Amelia ran through the takeoff sequence, her mind sharp, her body calm. The engines roared louder as they accelerated. The city blurred past in a mosaic of gray and gold. Then, just as the plane lifted into the pale morning sky, a gust of wind pushed against the fuselage, and Amelia felt the first shudder, a vibration that ran deep into her bones. Marcus's voice broke the momentary silence. "Ghost Rider, check your 6." Her heart skipped a beat. The repetition wasn't comforting. It was a warning. She turned to glance at him. His eyes, usually steady and warm, were focused on the horizon, a line of tension etched across his brow. There was no humor in his expression, no trace of the casual teasing she was used to. Amelia swallowed hard. Something was coming. She didn't know what, and that was worse than any mechanical failure, worse than turbulence, worse than anything she had trained for. She had been ready for emergencies, engine failures, storms, emergency landings, but never this. Not uncertainty. Not knowing what the threat was, only the ominous whisper of a nickname she didn't fully understand. As the plane climbed, Amelia glanced at the passengers below through the cabin window. They were oblivious, laughing quietly, scrolling on their phones, chatting about work or vacations. She felt the weight of responsibility press down like gravity multiplied. One misstep, one misjudgment, and hundreds of lives could be at stake. She gripped the control yoke tighter, knuckles whitening, and whispered under her breath, "I won't let anything happen." The first hints of clouds appeared on the horizon, gray tendrils curling into the blue sky. Amelia's stomach knotted. The wind picked up, rattling the fuselage. A chill ran down her spine despite the warmth of the cockpit. Then a flicker of movement in the clouds caught her eye. Something fast, too precise to be random weather. Her heart raced. Is it a bird, a drone, or something else? Marcus's hand rested lightly on the throttle, guiding the plane through a smooth ascent. But Amelia noticed a flicker of tension in his posture. His usual calm had shifted, imperceptibly but undeniably. And then, over the intercom, he spoke in a voice that froze her blood. "Ghost Rider, stay sharp." The words were simple, yet in their simplicity lay weight, authority, and fear. Fear she hadn't heard from him before. Amelia's mind raced. Stay sharp. For what? She scanned the horizon, the instruments, the clouds twisting in strange patterns that no radar should produce. Every part of her training screamed to stay calm, to rely on her skills, but instinct clawed at her with a single word: danger. The engines hummed steadily, yet the vibration under her hands felt off, almost alive. Amelia's eyes darted to the altimeter, the speedometer, the artificial horizon. Everything read normal, too normal. She frowned. Her gut screamed otherwise. And then in the silence between the engines and the wind, she thought she heard it. A low, unplaceable hum, like metal vibrating in tune with her own heartbeat. Amelia swallowed, trying to steady her breath. She turned slightly to Marcus. "Captain, what's going on?" she asked, her voice quieter than intended. Marcus didn't answer immediately. His eyes flicked to the instruments, then to the horizon, then back at her. "You'll see soon enough," he said finally, almost a whisper. And then, just as quickly, he was silent, his focus returning to the controls. Amelia's chest tightened. Something was coming. She didn't know what, and that ignorance was far worse than any storm or emergency she had faced in simulations. Her training, her instinct, and her youth all collided inside her, leaving her simultaneously terrified and determined. She gripped the controls tighter, staring out at the sky. The clouds ahead were thickening, rolling faster than any weather report had predicted. A shadow flickered across the cockpit windshield. Her pulse raced. The hum beneath her hands grew, almost synchronized with the rapid beating of her heart. Then Marcus Hale's voice came again, calm but deliberate, and it cut through the hum like a blade. "Ghost Rider, check your 6." Amelia's breath caught. She looked over her shoulder at the instruments, then at the horizon, then back at the cabin. Something was waiting. She didn't know what. She only knew one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever was coming, it wasn't ordinary turbulence. End Part 1 with suspense. Amelia senses something is profoundly wrong, and the captain's cryptic warning leaves her on the edge of a terrifying revelation she cannot yet understand. Amelia Vaughan's hands trembled just slightly as the Boeing 737 climbed through the lower stratosphere. The hum of the engines, a steady but unnerving companion. She had flown through storms, engine tests, and near-collision drills, but the tension in her chest today felt entirely different, heavier, electric, almost alive. Every instinct told her something was lurking beyond the clouds, something unseen, and the repeated warning, "Ghost Rider, check your six," echoed like a drumbeat in her mind. The cabin below was settling into routine chatter. A man in row 14 coughed nervously, glancing out the window as the plane rose above the city. A child pressed their small hands against the glass, marveling at the patchwork of streets, rivers, and morning fog below. Amelia forced herself to focus on the instruments. Airspeed, altitude, vertical velocity, all normal. Everything says calm. Why do I feel this? Lightning streaked across distant clouds, slicing through the gray like jagged silver knives. Amelia swallowed, fingers tightening on the yoke. Then came the first real tremor. The plane shuddered violently, a skeletal rattle that ran through the fuselage and into her bones. A loud metallic thump reverberated from the left engine. Amelia's stomach sank. This was no ordinary turbulence. "Engine 1 pressure dropping," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The words sounded hollow even to her ears. Marcus Hale's voice cut through the cockpit intercom, calm but sharp. "Hold her steady, Ghost Rider. Brace yourself." Amelia froze. She wasn't bracing for a routine shake or a gust. "He isn't telling me for comfort. He's warning me." The passengers screamed, some gasping in panic. Oxygen masks remained unused, but a few flight attendants gripped the overhead bins as if anchoring themselves. Amelia's gaze darted to the co-pilot's panel, then back to the instruments. Nothing indicated a critical failure. Yet the violent shudder persisted, jerking the plane like a wild stallion resisting a rider. "Captain, what's happening?" Amelia's voice was calm, but her heart raced. Marcus's eyes never left the horizon. "It's not just turbulence. Keep your eyes open, Ghost Rider, eyes open." Amelia's pulse jumped. He rarely sounded urgent, ever. Something beyond protocol was at play. She scanned the skis outside the cockpit, the swirling clouds almost forming shapes that didn't belong, twisting, unnatural, as if the atmosphere itself had a consciousness. Then the plane dipped sharply, pitching down before she could react. Passengers screamed, gripping their armrests, some with knuckles white. Amelia's stomach lurched. She yanked back on the controls, stabilizing the plane, but another tremor followed immediately. It was rhythmic, almost deliberate. Someone or something was orchestrating this. A flash of lightning illuminated the cabin, revealing terrified faces. A young couple clutched each other, their wedding rings gleaming in the flickering light. Amelia's eyes darted between them and the instruments. Every number was normal. Everything said the plane should be stable, but her gut screamed danger. The left engine gauge flickered, then steadied. The shuddering continued. Amelia's hands ached from gripping the controls. Every muscle in her body was taut, poised for action. She realized with a jolt, the plane was alive in a way she had never imagined, not with mechanical failures but with external forces she could not quantify. Marcus's voice cut in again, steadying but heavy with unspoken worry. "Ghost Rider, you need to take control. I'm occupied." Amelia blinked. Occupied, she turned to look at him, expecting some explanation, but his seat was empty. The co-pilot's chair was vacant. Her stomach dropped. The captain was gone. Her mind raced. Protocol demanded she call air traffic control, declare an emergency, and rely on autopilot, but instinct screamed otherwise. The autopilot was offline. Her hands were on the controls. She was alone, truly alone, in a plane that was no longer just obeying physics. A deafening thump echoed from above and the plane jolted violently. The cabin lights flickered, then dimmed, leaving the interior in a ghostly half-light. Passengers screamed louder, some praying, some screaming at one another, others frozen in disbelief. Amelia fought to maintain composure. Panic would be catastrophic. She glanced down at the checklist Marcus had left in the cockpit, a folder labeled Ghost Rider Protocol, for emergencies only. She had laughed nervously when he handed it to her weeks ago, assuming it was a joking nickname for daring maneuvers. Now, hands trembling, she realized it was something else entirely, something far darker. The turbulence intensified. Amelia followed the instructions in the folder, quickly flipping through pages with diagrams, radio frequencies, and cryptic notes. She realized the captain had prepared for this exact scenario, a situation beyond her training, beyond conventional aviation protocols. She felt a surge of fear mixed with adrenaline. She wasn't just flying. She was navigating a mission she didn't understand, guided only by the captain's cryptic instructions and a nickname she barely knew the meaning of. The plane pitched again violently. Amelia fought to stabilize it, muscles straining. She could hear the faint, low hum beneath the engines, the same vibration she had felt during takeoff, now amplified, resonating in a way that was almost unnatural. She scanned the clouds outside. They were no longer simple formations. They twisted, coiled, almost sentient. The sunlight barely penetrated the thick gray, and shadows danced across the cockpit like living things. Amelia's mind flashed to the passengers. Hundreds of lives depended on her. And yet the more she focused, the more surreal the world outside became. Instruments wavered briefly, altimeter swinging, speed fluctuating, but she adjusted instantly, drawing on every ounce of her training. The thrill she once loved about flying, the freedom, the control, was now mixed with terror. This was not a plain ride. This was a trial. Another violent shudder, stronger than before, nearly pitched her forward. Amelia gritted her teeth, adjusting the throttle, banking the plane slightly to compensate. She remembered Marcus's words, "Brace yourself." Now they made sense, but only partially. She had no idea what to brace for. The unknown stretched before her like an infinite dark tunnel, each moment heavier than the last. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the cabin in blinding flashes. Amelia glimpsed terrified eyes, faces pale and drawn, some whispering prayers, some silent, frozen in shock. And in that moment she realized this wasn't just turbulence. It wasn't weather. The storm outside seemed almost conscious, responding to the plane's movements, pushing and pulling with intent. Amelia's fingers dug into the control yoke. She could do this. She had to. She repeated the emergency procedures silently, adjusting altitude, stabilizing yaw, and correcting bank. But every calculation felt like it was being challenged by a force she could not see, could not predict. Then came a sound, a low, guttural resonance vibrating through the hull of the plane. It wasn't mechanical, it wasn't the wind. It was something else entirely. Amelia's eyes widened. She looked around the cockpit, checking instruments, panels, gauges. Everything appeared normal. And yet the hum persisted, steady and insistent, as if warning her. Amelia swallowed hard, realizing the truth she had been avoiding. The captain had not left her alone for fun. He had left her because she was the only one capable of following through. This was her trial. This was her moment. And in that moment she understood something deeper. Survival wasn't about skill alone. It was about courage, intuition, and trusting the cryptic guidance Marcus had provided. Her heart hammered as the plane rocked again, violently. The passengers screamed. The clouds outside swirled like a storm painted by a mad artist, lightning carving unnatural shapes across the sky. Amelia exhaled, steadying herself. She adjusted the throttle, aligned the plane, and whispered under her breath, "I've got this." And then, through the chaos, Marcus's voice came again over the comms, barely audible over the roar. "Ghost Rider, remember your training, trust the flight, don't fight it." Amelia's pulse raced. She knew instinctively that the moment for routine flying had passed. Something beyond comprehension was upon them, and the plane was now a vessel between the ordinary world and something else entirely. She tightened her grip, eyes scanning the instruments, the clouds, the trembling wings of the plane. End Part 2 with suspense. Amelia realizes this is no ordinary flight. External forces, mysterious warnings, and the captain's cryptic messages suggest that survival will depend on her following instructions she barely understands, with the plane itself seeming almost alive against her. The hum of the engines was no longer comforting. It had transformed into something alien, vibrating through Amelia Vaughn's bones as if the plane itself were alive, aware, testing her. The initial turbulence had passed, but the violent shudders were returning, irregular and unpredictable. The instruments read nominal, altitude stable, speeds within limits, but her instincts screamed otherwise. Amelia's pulse pounded in rhythm with the low thrum beneath her hands. Every sense screamed that this was not a mechanical failure, not weather, not anything she had trained for. This was something different, something intelligent, deliberate. The shadows in the clouds moved unnaturally, curling, twisting, coiling around the plane as if daring her to resist. She looked at the empty co-pilot's seat. Marcus Hale had been gone for minutes, leaving her alone in the cockpit. Not just alone in the usual sense, but truly alone, as if the entire world outside the fuselage had vanished and left her suspended in a storm designed to test her limits. A sudden thump shook the plane violently, almost throwing Amelia forward. Instruments flashed briefly, engine 1 dropping, pressure fluctuating, and then stabilized. Her stomach lurched. She gripped the yoke with white-knuckled determination, adjusting altitude and throttle simultaneously, heart hammering against her ribcage. She repeated Marcus's cryptic mantra in her mind, "Trust the flight, don't fight it." The cabin erupted in panic. Screams mingled with cries of prayer, the metallic groan of the fuselage blending with the sound of rattling luggage bins. Amelia risked a glance at the cabin below. Passengers were gripping seats, clinging to one another, some sobbing silently. The stark fear etched on their faces tore at her chest. These were ordinary people, caught in something extraordinary, and she was the only one who could guide them to safety. Her eyes flicked back to the folder Marcus had left, Ghost Rider Protocol. Pages flipped in the turbulence as she scanned instructions, diagrams, and coded emergency procedures. One set of instructions detailed a maneuver designed for engine failure scenarios over bodies of water. Another explained methods to navigate extreme turbulence using throttle adjustments combined with subtle control yoke inputs. Amelia's mind raced to process it all. And then the plane shuddered again, harder than before. The vibration was no longer random. It had rhythm, intent, almost as if the plane itself were being pushed, prodded, tested by an unseen hand. Amelia's stomach dropped. She realized something terrifying. Whatever was attacking the plane, it was probing for weakness. "Stay calm," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. She had rehearsed this in simulations hundreds of times, but simulations never accounted for the weight of human lives, never for the primal terror of the unknown pressing against you like a physical force. She took a deep breath, remembering every lesson Marcus had drilled into her. Trust your instincts, trust your instruments, trust your training. Another thump shook the plane. This time Amelia saw it clearly. The left engine gauge dropped sharply, then snapped back up. The sound was deafening, a grinding metallic wail, and the fuselage trembled under the stress. Amelia's stomach lurched violently. Passengers screamed, one man banging desperately on the overhead bin, his eyes wide with terror. Amelia's mind went into hyperfocus. She scanned the instrument panel, altitude stable, airspeed slightly fluctuating, flaps intact. Nothing indicated catastrophic failure. And yet the plane was being assaulted in a way she could not quantify. Her hands flew over the controls, adjusting throttle, ailerons, and rudder inputs in a precise, practiced rhythm. Each movement countered the violent, unpredictable forces battering the fuselage. Then a voice came over the comms, Marcus's voice, strained, almost a whisper. "Ghost Rider, I'm going down, take the wheel." Amelia froze. Her hands tightened on the yoke. "He's leaving me. Now." Her training screamed at her, "Do not panic." She was capable, but the weight of command felt like a physical force pressing down on her shoulders. She swallowed, fingers trembling slightly as she executed corrective maneuvers, following the coded instructions in the Ghost Rider folder. Lightning forked across the clouds, illuminating the cockpit in stark white flashes. Amelia caught a glimpse of something moving outside the window, a shadow, larger than any bird, twisting unnaturally through the storm. She blinked, then it was gone. Her pulse jumped. The plane pitched again, violently, almost rolling sideways. Amelia fought to stabilize it, pulling the yoke back as she adjusted rudder and throttle. Sweat stung her eyes and her voice cracked as she called out, "Cabin secure. Brace yourself." The loudspeaker squawked back, static cutting through the cabin. A flight attendant's voice trembled. "Passengers, please stay seated, masks on." Amelia's hands were raw from gripping the controls, her knuckles white. She scanned the instruments again. Engine pressure stable, altitude nominal, speed fluctuating. And yet the plane shuddered violently again, like a living thing testing her resolve. A sudden jolt threw Amelia into the seatbelt. Her stomach lurched as she fought to regain control. The left engine trembled, then the right. Warnings flashed briefly, lights blinking in unison with alarms, then disappeared. Everything was functioning, or appearing to function, but the sensation of danger was undeniable. Amelia realized something terrifying, the captain's last words, "I'm going down, take the wheel." A metaphor. He was gone. She was truly alone, and she was now responsible for every life on board. Another flash of lightning illuminated the cabin again. Amelia caught passengers clutching each other, tears streaming down faces, some silent in disbelief, some shouting, others whispering prayers. Fear had a tangible weight in the air, pressing down on her chest as she tried to focus. She realized the truth. This wasn't just a test of skill. It was a test of courage, intuition, and the ability to act without certainty, without guidance, without knowing what waited beyond the clouds. The plane shuddered violently again. Amelia adjusted, breathing through the fear, repeating Marcus's mantra silently, "Trust the flight. Don't fight it." She scanned the folder one more time, diagrams for evasive maneuvers, coordinates for potential emergency landing zones, instructions for stabilizing the plane during extreme turbulence. The next step was critical, an emergency descent over water, a maneuver she had never performed alone. Her stomach twisted. She looked at the dark, twisting clouds ahead. Lightning flashed again, revealing a sky that seemed alive, a living storm that bent and twisted unnaturally around them. Amelia gritted her teeth, hands shaking slightly but steady. This is it. The first real trial. The first warning that survival depends entirely on me. And then, just as suddenly as the turbulence began, the cabin lights flickered and dimmed. The plane trembled violently one final time, and Amelia felt the first true fear of her life. The moment when she realized she was entirely on her own. End part 3 with suspense. Amelia must face the reality that the captain is gone. The plane is being assaulted by an unknown force, and the next moments will test her skills, courage, and ability to survive alone. Amelia Vaughn's heart pounded like a war drum as she gripped the yoke, knuckles whitening. The plane shuddered violently under her hands, pitching downward in short, unpredictable bursts. Lightning slashed through the clouds outside the cockpit windows, illuminating the terror-stricken faces of passengers below. The fuselage groaned with every movement, a deep, resonant sound that echoed inside her chest, reminding her that the aircraft was more fragile than she had ever realized. Her training kicked in, but instinct overrode procedure. She scanned the instruments obsessively, altimeter steady for now, airspeed slightly fluctuating, vertical velocity climbing dangerously. The left engine warning light flickered again, teasing her panic. Her stomach lurched with every tremor of the plane, every violent sway that seemed orchestrated by something unseen. The storm was no ordinary turbulence. Clouds twisted and bent unnaturally, forming shapes that resembled looming figures, black and silent, moving around the plane. Amelia's breath caught. She realized the storm seemed aware of them, almost sentient, responding to every movement of the plane with increasing intensity. This was no weather. This was something alive, and it was testing her. "Trust the flight, don't fight it," Marcus's words whispered through her mind like a mantra. The folder lay open beside her, the pages fluttering with each violent jolt. Amelia flipped through the diagrams, memorizing each step, each coordinate, each emergency procedure. Her fingers flew across the throttle and yoke as she executed maneuvers that would have terrified even veteran pilots. Another violent shudder rocked the plane. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling as the cabin groaned, luggage tumbling from the bins. Amelia's stomach dropped with it. She clenched the yoke tighter, forcing her trembling arms to maintain control. She heard a scream from row 16 and swallowed the urge to look away. These were real people, real lives, and she would not fail. Lightning illuminated the cockpit. Amelia caught a glimpse of Marcus, then remembered he wasn't there. He had been gone for minutes, leaving her entirely alone in the storm. Her chest tightened with fear, but she focused. She wasn't just co-piloting anymore, she was the captain. Every decision, every maneuver, every second counted. The storm pressed closer. The plane pitched violently, dipping sharply before snapping upright. Amelia countered instinctively, adjusting ailerons and rudder, stabilizing the aircraft for the briefest moment before another jolt sent it lurching. She glanced at the left engine gauge. It wavered alarmingly, then steadied, almost taunting her. This was a test, and she was the sole player. A low, almost imperceptible hum vibrated through the fuselage, like the resonance of something massive approaching. Amelia's stomach churned. The storm's rhythm was deliberate now, synchronized with the plane's movements, almost like it was communicating or punishing. She gritted her teeth, forcing herself to focus entirely on the Ghost Rider protocols. The next maneuver was critical, a controlled descent over water, using the plane's glide to navigate the storm's unpredictable forces. Her mind raced. She had never practiced this maneuver alone, certainly not under these conditions. Yet the folder's instructions were clear. Do not fight the descent, trust the glide, adjust throttle in microseconds, use rudder sparingly. The river is your target, aim true. Amelia's stomach flipped as she considered the Hudson River below. The water shimmered faintly through the storm, a sliver of silver in a darkened world. She took a deep breath, remembering Marcus's voice, his calm authority guiding her even in his absence. Ghost Rider, brace yourself. She began the descent, the plane responding to her hands with a fragile grace. Lightning illuminated the twisted storm clouds, revealing their unnatural shapes again, dark, looming, almost humanoid. Amelia's pulse raced. Every instinct screamed terror, yet her training anchored her. She adjusted throttle and yoke with meticulous precision, each movement countering the violent forces that sought to pitch the plane into chaos. A passenger screamed from row 12, a raw, primal sound that pierced the cockpit's protective glass. Amelia's teeth clenched. She had to remain calm, had to guide this aircraft through forces that no simulator could replicate. Every second stretched, every jolt made her stomach lurch as if gravity itself were being rewritten. Then, as if to remind her of the stakes, a blinding flash of lightning struck nearby, and the plane rocked violently. Instruments flickered, the artificial horizon tilting dangerously, and Amelia's hands flew to stabilize the yoke. Her breath came in short, controlled bursts as she repeated the mantra, "Trust the flight. Don't fight it." She focused on the river below, shimmering faintly between the storm's twisted shadows. The Ghost Rider protocols guided her hands, each adjustment calculated yet instantaneous. The plane shuddered again, violently, almost bucking her like a wild horse. Amelia's stomach dropped with the sudden pitch, her vision narrowing to the controls, the river, and the storm. Another flash of lightning revealed something terrifying, shapes moving within the storm, almost like massive wings or twisted shadows moving alongside the plane. Amelia's heart raced. She had never seen anything like this in her training, in movies, or in simulations. And yet, she felt a strange clarity amidst the chaos. This was a test, and she was the only one capable of passing it. The plane pitched again, violently, and Amelia responded instinctively, her hands flying over the yoke and throttle. Every movement mattered. A slight miscalculation could send the plane into the storm, and she knew it. The passengers below were screaming, some clinging to each other, others sobbing quietly. Amelia's stomach churned as she felt the weight of their lives pressing down like a physical force. And then came the moment she had been preparing for. The plane approached the river, the water glinting through the storm's chaos. She adjusted the glide, carefully managing speed and altitude. The plane shuddered violently again, wings threatening to tilt, but she countered minute by minute, second by second. Every muscle in her body tensed, focused entirely on precision. The river loomed larger and Amelia's pulse raced. She knew she had one chance, one precise glide, guided by instinct, training, and the Ghost Rider protocols. Sweat stung her eyes as she whispered to herself, "You can do this. You have to do this." A final jolt rocked the plane, violent and sudden, almost throwing her forward. Amelia gritted her teeth, eyes narrowing on the river below. She pulled back slightly on the yoke, adjusted the throttle, and guided the plane into the descent. Time seemed to slow. Every second stretched into eternity. The plane responded almost delicately to her touch, gliding closer to the river's shimmering surface. End Part 4 with suspense. Amelia begins the harrowing descent toward the river, fighting violent forces that defy explanation. She is entirely alone, relying on cryptic instructions, her instincts, and sheer courage. But the storm is far from over, and the landing will determine the fate of every soul on board. The river glimmered faintly below, a thin, silvery ribbon cutting through the chaos of the storm. Amelia Vaughan's hands were raw from gripping the yoke, her eyes stinging from sweat and adrenaline, but she forced herself to focus. The violent shudders of the plane had lessened slightly, though the storm above seemed to pulse with intent, almost sentient. Her pulse raced, synchronized with the vibration beneath her hands. Every second mattered. Every decision now could mean life or death. Her eyes flicked to the Ghost Rider folder beside her. She had barely had time to scan it during the earlier turbulence, but now, with the river below, every page became a lifeline. Marcus Hale had left her detailed instructions, emergency procedures, emergency landing coordinates, and cryptic diagrams explaining maneuvers she could barely comprehend. At first, she had assumed the folder was a joke, part of his mentorship to build her confidence. Now, with the storm howling around her, she realized the truth. This was no ordinary emergency. This was a premeditated contingency, a plan Marcus had devised for an event that had never been publicly disclosed, a threat so extraordinary that even the airline could not warn her. The folder contained codes, frequencies, and maneuvers meant for a situation that defied the very laws of normal aviation. Amelia's stomach twisted as she realized the enormity of it. The captain had not just left her alone, he had chosen her for this. She was the only one capable of following through. A flash of lightning illuminated the cockpit, revealing Amelia's reflection. Her eyes were wide with fear, but there was determination there too. She exhaled sharply, forcing herself to focus on the instructions. One diagram detailed a maneuver called the controlled glide sequence, meant for emergency descents over water when normal engines could not stabilize the aircraft. The instructions were precise, almost surgical, dictating minute throttle adjustments, microaerodynamic corrections, and exact rudder inputs. The folder's final note was chilling yet clear. Trust yourself. Trust the flight. Ghost Rider is not a name, it is a responsibility. Amelia's mind raced. Ghost Rider is not a name. She realized with a shiver that Marcus had been preparing her for this, not just as a pilot, but as someone capable of executing extraordinary measures under impossible pressure. The captain had known the storm would strike, or at least understood the kind of forces she was about to face. And now, it was her turn to act. The plane shuddered again, violently. Amelia adjusted the throttle in precise micro-movements, keeping the glide steady as the river below widened in her view. The water's reflection shimmered ominously through the storm. The wings creaked under pressure, each vibration a warning that any misstep could be catastrophic. She repeated the mantra again, silently, trust the flight, don't fight it. A low hum reverberated through the fuselage, a sound that had been growing since takeoff. Amelia realized it wasn't coming from the engines. It was external, a resonance that seemed alive, reacting to the plane's every adjustment. She glanced outside, and the storm seemed almost purposeful, twisting and curling around them, lightning arcing in unnatural angles. The clouds weren't just weather. They were obstacles, sentient and deliberate. Amelia's hands flew over the yoke and throttle. Each movement was calculated, guided by the Ghost Rider protocols and her own instinct honed through years of training. She remembered Marcus's voice, calm and authoritative, guiding her through countless flights in her mind. "You are capable. You are ready. You are Ghost Rider." The storm intensified, gusts slamming into the fuselage. The plane pitched violently to the left, then right, the river below spinning in her vision. Amelia adjusted, using the glide sequence to counteract the forces. She could hear the screams of passengers below, but she couldn't look. Focus was absolute. One slip and hundreds of lives would be lost. Amelia's gaze flicked back to the folder. There was one last section she hadn't fully read: Final Emergency Protocol, Water Landing Stabilization. The instructions were cryptic yet precise. Angle the wings, reduce throttle gradually, maintain rudder alignment, anticipate gust patterns, and trust the glide. The final note was simple yet haunting. Once committed, there is no turning back. You are the Ghost Rider. Protect the lives entrusted to you. Her pulse raced. She exhaled slowly, gripping the yoke tighter. Every skill she had, every instinct she had developed, would now be put to the ultimate test. She began adjusting the throttle in micro-intervals, carefully managing the descent. The plane responded with a delicate balance, wings flexing under the strain, fuselage groaning with every gust. Lightning illuminated the river below again. The water reflected silver and gray, a treacherous mirror of the storm above. Amelia adjusted her glide, aligning the plane with the river's flow, compensating for crosswinds, reading every subtle movement of the aircraft as if it were an extension of her own body. She realized that this was more than flying. This was survival on a scale she had never imagined. A sudden jolt nearly threw her forward. Amelia's hands reacted instinctively, correcting with split-second precision. The plane stabilized, but only briefly. Another wave of turbulence slammed against the fuselage, stronger this time, threatening to tip the aircraft sideways. Amelia's heart raced. She could feel the storm testing her, pushing her to the brink. Her mind flashed back to Marcus, to the countless hours of training, to the subtle lessons he had imparted. Stay calm, anticipate, trust the aircraft, trust yourself. Ghost Rider isn't a name. It's a responsibility. The weight of those words settled in her chest like armor. She was the sole protector of the lives below, the only one who could navigate this storm. Amelia focused entirely on the river ahead. The folder's diagrams guided her hands, each adjustment precise, minute essential. The plane shuddered violently again, but she remained steady, countering each force with calculated movements. The passengers below screamed and cried, but Amelia could not falter. She was the Ghost Rider now, a title heavier than any she had ever borne. As the river approached, Amelia felt a strange clarity. The storm, violent and alive, was testing her, but she had control. Not absolute, but enough. Enough to protect the lives entrusted to her. She repeated Marcus's final instructions silently, a mantra she clung to like a lifeline: trust the flight, don't fight it. Then a flash of lightning revealed something terrifying. Shadows in the storm, massive shapes moving alongside the plane, twisting unnaturally with the wind. Amelia's pulse jumped, but she held her focus. She could not falter. She adjusted the throttle, maintained glide, and prepared for the final descent toward the river. In Part 5 with suspense. Amelia now understands the full gravity of the Ghost Rider secret. She is the sole executor of Marcus's contingency plan. The storm is alive, sentient, and testing her with forces beyond comprehension. The river landing is imminent, and failure is not an option. Every second from here will define life or death. The Hudson stretched below Amelia Vaughn, a silver thread of water winding through the chaos of the storm. The plane trembled violently under her hands, every gust of wind threatening to tip it sideways. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the river's surface, and for a moment the water seemed to shimmer like liquid glass, deceptively calm beneath the storm's fury. Amelia's knuckles whitened as she gripped the yoke, forcing her trembling arms to maintain precise control. The Ghost Rider protocols guided her hands, every micro-adjustment calculated, every second critical. Her pulse pounded, echoing the low hum that had been growing since takeoff, a resonance not of engines but of the storm itself, alive and deliberate. Amelia could feel it pressing against the fuselage, testing her resolve, testing the plane's limits. She realized with a jolt, this storm was not a random act of nature. It had purpose, intelligence, and now it had her attention. The plane pitched violently to the left, wings flexing under the strain. Amelia reacted instantly, adjusting throttle, rudder, and ailerons in perfect harmony. Each movement countered the storm's assault, each calculation executed with the precision of a surgeon. She could hear the screams of passengers below, the metallic groan of luggage tumbling from overhead bins, the faint cries of children, yet she could not allow panic to touch her. Not now, not ever. She glanced again at the Ghost Rider folder. The final instructions were clear, almost surgical. Glide the plane over the river, anticipate gusts, maintain microcorrections, and trust the natural flow of the glide. Marcus Hale had left her everything she needed, but the execution depended entirely on her ability to remain calm under unimaginable pressure. Another violent jolt threw her forward. The plane pitched sharply, almost tipping into a roll. Amelia's stomach lurched, her body instinctively reacting to the aircraft's movement. She fought to stabilize it, adjusting the throttle with micro-precision, keeping the glide steady. The river below widened, a silver ribbon illuminated intermittently by flashes of lightning. She exhaled slowly, forcing herself to focus, to trust the flight, to trust herself. A shadow moved through the storm outside, massive and serpentine, twisting with the wind as if to challenge her control. Amelia's pulse raced. She had never seen anything like it, not in simulations, not in movies, not in any training manual. Yet she remained focused. This was no longer just a test of skill. It was a trial of courage, instinct, and endurance. The plane shuddered violently again, wings threatening to tilt as the storm's power pressed against it. Amelia fought to maintain the glide, adjusting throttle, ailerons, and rudder with every ounce of precision. She could feel the plane's metal flexing under the pressure, but it responded to her commands like a living creature, delicate yet resilient. The river beckoned below, the only possible refuge in this chaos. Passengers screamed, some clutching each other, others praying silently. Amelia's chest tightened as she glanced at them briefly, seeing faces filled with terror and hope. Hundreds of lives depended on her now. She could not falter. She could not fail. The Ghost Rider protocols were her guide, her lifeline, and the responsibility that weighed on her shoulders heavier than any she had ever carried. The plane dipped sharply again, and Amelia reacted instinctively, adjusting throttle and yoke to maintain the glide. She remembered Marcus's words, "Trust the flight. Don't fight it." They were no longer instructions, they were survival. Every micro-movement mattered, every second stretched into an eternity. The river approached, shimmering between the storm's chaotic shadows, and Amelia prepared for the final descent. A sudden gust slammed into the left wing, sending the plane into a violent tilt. Amelia's stomach lurched as she countered, minute by minute, second by second. The plane trembled under her hands, responding to her control with fragile precision. Sweat stung her eyes, but she refused to blink, refused to lose focus. She was the Ghost Rider now, the sole protector of every life on board. Lightning illuminated the river below, revealing the width and flow of the water, but the storm above continued to challenge her. The plane pitched violently again, and Amelia's heart raced. She adjusted throttle, yoke, and rudder in precise harmony, guiding the plane closer to the water. The Ghost Rider folder's diagrams flashed in her mind, every instruction executed with perfect timing. The low hum beneath the fuselage intensified, resonating through the plane, the storm, and her own heartbeat. Amelia realized the storm was testing her, pushing her to the brink, seeking a weakness she could not afford to show. She focused entirely on the river, the glide, and the plane's response. One miscalculation, one hesitation, could mean disaster. The plane dipped again, dangerously low, and Amelia felt her pulse spike. The water shimmered below, a narrow path in the storm's chaos. She adjusted the throttle gradually, micro-corrected the yoke, and kept the wings level. Each second stretched, each movement critical, as the plane responded to her with delicate compliance. The passengers' screams faded into the background, replaced by the singular focus of survival. And then, as the river drew closer, the storm unleashed its final assault, a violent gust that threw the plane nearly sideways. Amelia's stomach lurched violently, but she refused to panic. She executed the final Ghost Rider maneuver, throttle adjustments in microseconds, rudder corrections, and a delicate glide over the water's surface. The plane responded with almost miraculous precision, wings flexing under the stress, fuselage groaning, yet remaining intact. Amelia's eyes narrowed on the river below. The water shimmered violently under the storm's reflection, but she maintained her glide, guiding the plane with skill and instinct alone. Lightning illuminated the path ahead, revealing the width of the river and the obstacles along its banks. She adjusted, micro-corrected, and guided the aircraft into position for an emergency water landing. The fuselage trembled violently one final time, but Amelia held steady. The plane descended gradually, wings level, glide perfect. She exhaled, focusing on the final seconds, every muscle in her body tense yet precise. The river approached faster now, and Amelia knew the moment of truth was at hand. End Part 6 with suspense. Amelia executes the final Ghost Rider maneuvers over the river, fighting the storm's relentless assault with skill, instinct, and courage. The emergency water landing is imminent, and every second will determine whether hundreds of lives are saved or lost to the storm's fury. The river loomed closer, a silvery ribbon cutting through the violent storm below. Amelia Vaughn's knuckles ached from gripping the yoke, sweat stinging her eyes, yet her focus was unyielding. Every passenger, every life aboard depended entirely on her now. The plane trembled violently under the storm's assault, yet the Ghost Rider protocols guided her hands, micro-adjustments flowing instinctively. She felt the plane responding to her touch, almost as if it were alive, working with her rather than against her. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the riverbanks and the storm-tossed water below. Amelia adjusted the throttle, rudder, and ailerons in perfect harmony, guiding the Boeing 737 into the narrow corridor of silver water. The low hum that had haunted the plane since takeoff resonated beneath her, growing into a palpable vibration, as if the storm itself recognized the critical moment. Her pulse raced, synchronized with the plane's subtle, tense quiver. The first wave of the storm slammed into the fuselage violently, rocking the plane sideways. Amelia's stomach lurched as she fought to stabilize the aircraft. She countered with minute adjustments, throttle micro-corrections, rudder alignment, each movement executed with surgical precision. The Ghost Rider protocols had prepared her for this, but no training could simulate the sheer terror of hundreds of lives balancing on the edge of chaos. Below, passengers screamed, clinging desperately to each other. A mother whispered frantic prayers to her child in row 7, tears streaming down both their faces. Amelia's chest tightened, and for a fleeting moment fear threatened to overwhelm her. But she exhaled slowly, repeating Marcus Hale's mantra, "Trust the flight. Don't fight it." She reminded herself that panic would be catastrophic. Only focus and precision could save them. The river widened beneath the plane, its surface rippling violently under the storm. Lightning illuminated darkened waves, revealing debris, branches, floating logs, and the shattered reflection of the storm above. Amelia adjusted the glide, wings flexing under the strain, fuselage groaning but holding firm. Every micro-correction mattered. One wrong movement, one delayed reaction, and catastrophe would strike. A sudden gust slammed into the left wing, tipping the plane sharply. Amelia reacted instantly, countering with throttle, rudder, and ailerons, stabilizing the aircraft for a brief, fragile moment. The river gleamed beneath her, deceptively calm, but the storm's relentless power reminded her that nothing was guaranteed. She adjusted the throttle slightly, aligning the glide perfectly for the final descent. The low hum beneath the fuselage intensified, vibrating through the plane and through her own body. Amelia realized that this was no ordinary storm. The wind, the lightning, even the pressure in the clouds felt almost sentient, responding to the plane's every move. She tightened her jaw, pushing fear aside, and focused entirely on the Ghost Rider instructions. The river narrowed, a thin corridor of water flanked by trees and urban structures on either side. Amelia's eyes flicked between the instruments and the water below, measuring speed, altitude, glide angle, and wind impact. The plane trembled violently again, wings threatening to tilt. Her heart pounded. Every second stretched into eternity. She felt the weight of responsibility like a physical force pressing down on her shoulders. Another violent jolt rocked the plane, throwing her slightly forward. She gritted her teeth and adjusted the controls in precise harmony, maintaining glide, keeping wings level. Sweat ran down her temples as lightning illuminated the storm once again. The river reflected silver, dark shadows dancing across its surface. Amelia's chest tightened with fear, adrenaline, and determination. She was the Ghost Rider now, the sole protector of hundreds of lives, and failure was not an option. A massive gust struck, rocking the plane violently, and Amelia felt the fuselage flex under the stress. She countered immediately, throttle microcorrections, rudder adjustments, aileron precision. The plane responded, fragile but obedient, as if acknowledging her authority. The river shimmered closer, the water rushing past in blurred streaks, and Amelia prepared for the final moments. Her hands were raw, trembling slightly from the intensity, but focus remained absolute. The Ghost Rider folder lay open beside her, diagrams flashing in her mind. Glide, throttle, rudder, wing alignment. She followed each step instinctively, movements flowing in a precise rhythm with the plane's subtle tremors. Each correction brought her closer to the water, closer to survival. Lightning illuminated the river one last time, revealing its treacherous surface, broken by floating debris. Amelia adjusted, micro-corrected, maintaining the glide, keeping the plane level. Her pulse raced in sync with the low hum beneath the fuselage. She realized that the storm was testing her until the very last moment, a sentient obstacle challenging her skill, courage, and resolve. The river was now almost beneath her. Amelia took a deep breath, hands steady despite exhaustion, guiding the plane with surgical precision. The final Ghost Rider maneuver approached. Water contact, controlled deceleration, wings level, throttle carefully managed to reduce impact. She whispered Marcus's mantra, almost a prayer now, trust the flight. Don't fight it. The plane touched the water, the nose dipping slightly, creating a violent splash. Amelia's hands worked frantically, countering drag, aligning wings, stabilizing descent. Water roared against the fuselage, but the plane held, flexing under the impact. The passengers screamed and clutched each other, adrenaline mixing with terror and hope. Amelia's focus never wavered. She was alive in a way she had never known, every instinct honed, every calculation precise. The fuselage skidded across the river, water spraying violently, yet Amelia maintained control, micro-adjusting throttle, ailerons, and rudder. The plane slowed, finally stabilizing as it skimmed the river surface. She felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down, yet clarity remained. She had done it. Against impossible odds, she had guided the plane safely onto the water. Lightning cracked again, illuminating the storm's retreat. Amelia exhaled slowly, glancing at the passengers. Relief, disbelief, and gratitude painted every face. Children clutched their parents, tears streaming. Adults whispered prayers, shaking, awed by the miraculous survival. Amelia's hands finally relaxed slightly, though tension still lingered. She had survived the storm, but the full weight of the Ghost Rider secret was only now dawning on her. Marcus Hale's voice came over the intercom, calm but ethereal, almost as if he had been guiding her throughout, even from beyond sight. "Ghost Rider, you have done it. Lives saved, courage proven. The mission is complete." Amelia's chest tightened. She realized the true scale of the Ghost Rider legacy. Marcus had chosen her not just for skill, but for the heart, instinct, and courage required to survive against forces no ordinary pilot could withstand. The storm had been more than weather. It had been a trial, a judgment, a crucible in which she had forged herself into something beyond ordinary. End Part 7 with suspense. The plane floats on the river, survivors shaken but alive. Amelia realizes she has completed the first phase of the Ghost Rider mission, but the storm, the secret protocols, and the full purpose of Marcus's contingency plan hint at forces and dangers that are still beyond her understanding. The story is far from over. The Boeing 737 floated silently on the Hudson, wings cutting through the gray water with fragile grace. The storm had begun to retreat, leaving a sky streaked with fatting lightning and bruised clouds. Amelia Vaughn sat back slightly, hands still gripping the yoke, every muscle tense and raw from the ordeal. Her chest heaved, lungs burning from the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. The passengers below were still shaking, clutching each other in disbelief. Some wept, some whispered prayers of gratitude, but all were alive. Every life depended on her, and she had delivered. She let her eyes sweep the cabin. Faces pale and exhausted stared at her with awe and wonder. A young girl in row 8 hugged her father, whispering something Amelia could barely hear. "She saved us." The words struck her harder than any turbulence ever could. She wasn't just a pilot anymore. She was the Ghost Rider, Marcus Hale's legacy entrusted to her, tested by forces she hadn't understood until now. The low hum beneath the fuselage, once menacing and almost alive, had softened. The plane's metal creaked gently under the water's weight, a reminder of how close they had been to catastrophe. Amelia exhaled slowly, running a hand over her face, trying to let the tension seep from her body. Yet even in this moment of apparent relief, her mind was racing. Marcus's cryptic warnings, the Ghost Rider protocols, the storm that seemed almost conscious. It had all been preparation for something far bigger than a single flight. She glanced at the open folder, its pages soaked but intact, diagrams smudged by condensation. The final instructions had been executed flawlessly, but the meaning behind them remained partially obscured. Marcus had left clues, lessons, and warnings, but the full truth of the Ghost Rider mission stretched beyond survival. She realized now that she had passed the first test, controlling the plane, guiding lives through the impossible, embracing courage under unimaginable pressure. But the greater purpose, the reason Marcus had prepared her, was only beginning to reveal itself. Amelia's eyes drifted to the water outside the cockpit. The river reflected the storm's retreat, silver glimmers breaking through dark ripples. Her hands were still trembling slightly, but they were steady enough to guide the aircraft toward a safe shore. Emergency boats were approaching, sirens faint in the distance, but her focus remained singular: ensure every life on board reached solid ground safely. One by one, passengers began to evacuate. Flight attendants coordinated with calm precision, guiding survivors to life rafts and safety boats. Amelia watched silently, the weight of responsibility still pressing down. She had survived, yes, but she had been chosen for more than surviving storms. The Ghost Rider legacy was not just about courage. It was about purpose, duty, and embracing responsibility in the face of incomprehensible danger. The intercom crackled softly, and Marcus's voice, recorded, preserved, and somehow more resonant than ever, filled the cockpit. "Ghost Rider, you have proven yourself. You have embraced the responsibility I entrusted to you. But this is not the end. Your journey begins here. Protect, guide, and survive. Trust the flight. Trust yourself." Amelia's chest tightened. The words were not just praise, they were instruction, confirmation that the title she now carried had weight beyond the immediate flight. Marcus had prepared her for something greater, a life defined by vigilance, courage, and extraordinary responsibility. The Ghost Rider legacy wasn't just about flying. It was about being the calm in chaos, the hand guiding the many through storms, literal or metaphorical. She watched the riverbank approach. Emergency crews were waiting, ready to assist, but Amelia's focus never wavered. The plane touched gently on solid ground, skimming the water until the nose settled. Engines throttled down carefully, and the fuselage creaked as it came to rest. Silence fell briefly over the passengers, the storm's roar replaced by the murmurs of disbelief, relief, and gratitude. Amelia exhaled fully for the first time since the turbulence began, every muscle in her body relaxing into exhaustion. Then from the crowd, voices rose. She did it. She saved everyone. The words spread like wildfire. Tears, laughter, and trembling cries filled the air as passengers emerged from the plane, hands clinging to each other, faces pale and shaken but alive. Amelia stepped out of the cockpit, shoulders heavy but upright, and felt a profound shift in herself. She was no longer just Amelia Vaughn, pilot. She was Ghost Rider, a title earned through courage, skill, and unwavering resolve. A journalist approached, microphone thrust forward. "Miss Vaughn, how did you survive that storm? How did you save all these people?" Amelia shook her head, a faint smile brushing her lips. Words felt inadequate. She thought of Marcus, of the cryptic folder, of every second of calculated terror and instinctual bravery. Some truths, she realized, could not be fully explained. They could only be lived. Emergency responders guided the last passengers to safety. Amelia lingered near the plane, looking back at the water, at the storm now retreating into dark clouds, leaving the world bruised but intact. She thought of Marcus's final words, "Trust the flight, trust yourself." The truth resonated. She had done both, and in doing so she had discovered something deeper than survival. She had discovered purpose. The sun broke briefly through the clouds, casting a faint golden shimmer over the river. Amelia's reflection stared back at her, face streaked with sweat, eyes wide with the mixture of terror and triumph. She felt the full weight of the Ghost Rider legacy settle on her shoulders, not as a burden but as a mantle. She had faced forces beyond comprehension, guided lives through chaos, and emerged not just alive but transformed. As helicopters and emergency boats circled, capturing every moment, Amelia felt a hand on her shoulder. It was the first officer, soaked and shivering yet smiling. You were incredible," he whispered. "I've never seen anyone handle that like you did." Amelia nodded, letting the weight of relief mix with pride. "We all did it," she said quietly, eyes scanning the river, still wary of shadows, still attuned to the subtle hum of life, machines, and nature. She turned her gaze to the city beyond the river, lights glinting through the rain, and realized the truth. The Ghost Rider legacy was not confined to this flight, this storm, or even this river. It was a responsibility that would follow her for life, a call to courage in moments when ordinary humans might falter, when instinct, training, and heart must align to protect the lives of many. Amelia took a deep breath. The storm had passed, but her journey was only beginning. The Ghost Rider title was not a reward, it was a responsibility, a call to embrace the extraordinary, to act with courage when the world teetered on chaos. She felt the weight, the purpose, and the power all at once. She had been tested and she had survived. She had been transformed. The final image lingered, Amelia standing on the riverbank, wet, exhausted yet unbroken, eyes fixed on the horizon where the storm had been. Behind her, survivors clutched each other, gratitude etched on every face. Ahead, the unknown stretched, full of challenge and opportunity. She was ready. She was Ghost Rider. In Part 8, Amelia has landed the plane successfully, saved all passengers, and embraced the full weight of the Ghost Rider legacy. The storm has passed, but the story leaves lingering suspense. Her journey as a protector, guide, and extraordinary pilot has only just begun, promising future trials, courage, and cinematic heroism.